Okay then. Okay, so one thing I want to try out is showing how to work on replacing the belt. So first off, we need a ratchet. Yeah. Okay, so typically, ooh, looks like they made new updates. Hold on a sec. Okay, so here, let's see, can I raise this up or down? Okay, I set the lift to go down just for a moment. Okay, so here is an example. Sorry, there's something in the way. Example of an engine. This is a 4-cylinder, as we could see. 1, 2, 3, 4 spark plugs, and these are the spark plug wires, as we could see. And inside there's the spark plug. What this connects to is the coil pack, which is, well, this game doesn't have everything, so none of these things are connected, but it would be connected to the ECU or whatever is monitoring the ignition cycle. Here we have intake, because since it's 4-cylinder, one side is going to be these 4 right here are going to be the intakes. This is the intake manifold. This is the throttle body. And then right over here is the intake itself. So this is the filter. So there it goes in there. It is adjusted based on this. Damn it. Based on how open the throttle is, the more air will go in, and it goes inside here. And actually, if I force my head in, you could see that this pipe, for instance, for the 1st cylinder, it goes into the cylinder based on 2 pistons, 2 valves, and there's the piston and there's the rod. Okay, anyway. Then it comes out through the exhaust manifold, which is this part right here. See how it ends right there? And then that goes out, and the pipe goes along towards the back or to the side. It all depends. Next, we have the radiator. This is where your coolant is located. Fans, this vehicle doesn't have a fan on there, but fans would blow air through here, so that way it cools the coolant, and the coolant flows into here, into the water pump, which is behind this shield here, which flows through the entire engine block before coming out through here and back in here, cooling down, etc. So what I want to do here is show how to replace cool, I guess. Um, replacing the brake pads, because that's essentially what everyone has to do at some point. Gonna need more foot-pounds. Yeah, good enough. Okay, so first things first, The lug nuts, now they add gravity. Well, let's just bring the whole car down. Fuck it. Good enough. Okay. So there's a third. There's the fourth. Interestingly enough, you may notice vehicles have more or less um, lug nuts. Sometimes that's just purely due to performance needs, and sometimes it seems relative to what kind of engine they have. Honestly, it's kind of just down to torque. Last thing you want are the bolts to be broken. Anyway, so here, this right here that just lit up red, this is the rotor. And as you can see, it has a gap in the middle, and that means that it's vented. So as these uh, rotors heat up, there's at least a gap in the middle and then on both sides to help cool it down. So the last thing you need is for this to overheat, and you'll see that on high performance cars where they start glowing red because they're that damn hot. Anyway, so what we have right here, this is the caliper. Whenever you're replacing your brake pads, that's typically what you have to remove. So there's one, and then there's two. And that's literally it. You just take this off. Obviously, right here at this little spout, there's actually a tube that connects to it that leads to this, which is the my words are fleeting me. Master cylinder. That controls the brakes, and that's the booster. And up here, if we remove this, we could see where the brake fluid is. And you can see that there's a min and a max, and on this vehicle, it's pretty close to max, so we're all good. So when you replace the brake pads, you just slide them out. And then that's it. You take your new ones. You may have to put on the new pieces, and sometimes these little metal pieces as well. Usually that's what you'll do, because those old things, all these brake hardware, they get rusty, they start screeching, they start to deteriorate. Usually that's why it's good for when you replace your brake pads to also replace those as well. Not only that, I don't think this game has it, but what you always do when you are reinstalling new brake pads is apply some grease here and here on both sides, as well as the back, of your new brake pads. So when you have your new brake pads and you've already applied all the thermal grease, you can just slide it back into place. Sometimes you can slide it in from the side, or you just pop it in place here. Then just put it back on. Now the next part is this. Since your brake pads have gotten worn down, this piston right here that's inside, some vehicles have two pistons, some have four, and at the high end you got six. Anyway, these pistons must be compressed back in. Now what I do is I will take a piece of like a wood block, put it on here, and take a C-clamp one side here and the other side here and compress it until this piston is completely flush with the body here. And then once that's in place, God, once it's flattened, then I slide it back into position. Of course, on here it doesn't matter. Then you put it back into position, put these bolts back in, and no need to overly tighten them. I would say I'm not exactly sure what the torque spec is actually. Hmm, let's see. Okay, stall info. This might be actually doesn't even say either. Okay, unimportant then. And you just bolt those in, and then you have to bleed your brakes. So you take this one, you take like a. It all depends on what size this is. Let me take this off. So as you can see, it's hexagonal. So you can take a regular little wrench. Usually it's going to be between 7 and 9 millimeters. So 7, 8, or 9. You put that on, and then you put the brake line back on here. Now, there are ways that you could do this by yourself, but if you have someone with you, it's always easier because essentially what they would do is they pump the brakes and then push it down and hold while you open this up or loosen it. Hold on a second. Oh, that's right. Okay. So, okay, so the brake lines, they don't go into this. They go into probably this position right here. This one is still going to be the bleeder valve. So what you have is you'll have a like a water bottle that's empty and dry, filled I would say maybe like a third of the way up with dot 4 brake oil, brake fluid I mean. And you have a tube going from that to this bleeder valve. And then same thing as before, they pump the brakes and then they press and hold it while you unlock the loosen the bleeder valve just a single turn until you can see that fluid's moving into your bottle. And then once you see there are no more bubbles, go ahead and close the valve and then have them do that maybe like another 2 or 3 times until there are literally no bubbles flowing into your water bottle. Once that's once that is once there are no more bubbles, then you can go ahead and close it and take it off and then move to the next side. Now, if you had to replace the rotor itself, it's a lot more work, but let's do it. So we already have all this stuff off. It's always going to be the same. Now, this we have to remove. And on the back, you can see there's 2 more bolts. And it connects to the control, what's his name? This hub. So you just unbolt those, and then look at that. This comes right off. No problem whatsoever. Now, this this may come off or may not. So, for instance, this one right here, it just comes off. So, a lot of vehicles, They may have free-floating rotors, which means that there's nothing bolting it to this hub, the front hub, yes. Other vehicles, however, they may have a bolt, one on one side, one on the other, so that way it's locked into place. Those are a lot harder because these rotors rarely get replaced very often. I mean, odds are you'll probably go 3 to 4 years without any issue. Um, Sometimes shorter than that. It all depends on how you drive it. Um, and this center part of the rotor gets very rusty, which means that the bolts also get rusty as well. And typically, what you have to do is you have to get like a Phillips Phillips screwdriver 3, size 3, push in, push in as hard as you can, and turn. Sometimes you have to use a hammer and hammer the screwdriver to help. And that's after you've already lubricated a little bit. Then once those come out, then you can take this off and go ahead and put the new one on. And you just pop it in place. Then you put this one back into its position. And take these bolts, put them back in. Does this say? Nope, it does not say. Okay. Anyway, for these, I typically just um, tighten as hard as I can with just the regular 3/8 inch ratchet. This looks more like a 1/2 inch, but anyway. You just put on your brake pads, just like the way you did before. Now, if you're just replacing the rotor and not the brake pads, because let's say they're still pretty damn good, usually you're going to replace the rotor and the brake pads if the rotor is bad, because if it's warped or cracked, it can damage your rotors as well. It can also damage your brake pads as well. But if they're fine, like you're just monitoring, checking out the rotors or something, and you happen to take all this stuff out, then you could just slide this back on without having to bleed them or um, compress the piston in there. WTF? Okay. So that's it for right now. We'll probably get into more depth at another time, but I just wanted to start this out just a little bit, see how it goes. All right.
Mic off.